there's this opening in the trees down there at that end, so I peer into it from my standpoint. And there's like an inhumanly contorting arm with the color of a decayed corpse-like brown shows itself from like the opening down by the bushes, and it hides itself after about 3, maybe 4 seconds.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Odd Virginia. This is Alex Koska coming to you from the Odd Virginia studio, aka my unfinished basement. Happy December to all of you. This is a magical time of year, or at least we like to tell ourselves it's a magical time of year so we can get through how crappy it might be. Me personally, I just started a new job with a shipping company, and at Christmas time you can imagine just how busy it can be. It can be pretty stressful, and we actually had 3 people quit this week. I guess they were sick of playing Santa Claus. Now, I just started, so everything is still fresh and fun for me. I can imagine this time next year I'm going to be very unhappy about it, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But needless to say, it's taken up a lot of my time being busy and all with the Christmas season. So I've got one day off a week that I can spend putting this podcast together, and I'm so glad to be back. I'm so glad to be here with you guys. And let me tell you, tonight's guest has a short but very, very impactful story as far as I'm concerned. We don't have much information on the guy himself. He wanted to remain anonymous for reasons, and I will grant him that anonymity if he will share his story with us. So we're going to call him John, and he lives somewhere in Northern Virginia. That's all we know. But you got to listen to this. It's absolutely crazy. And by crazy, I just mean spectacular, fun, scary. Just buckle up. Get ready for this. Now, John was talking with us on his cell phone, which means that there are some weird artifacts going on in the recording. So if you hear anything that sounds kind of strange while you're listening, don't worry. It's not your playback device. It was his connection, and there's nothing I really could do about that, so I'm sorry if it sounds a little bit annoying, but that's just how it is. But before we get to John's story, if you have anything you'd like to share on the show, you can send me an email at oddvirginia@protonmail.com. That's oddvirginia@protonmail.com. I'd love to hear from you, because here at Odd Virginia,
we're ready to believe you.
All right, so today on the show, we have a young man who wishes to remain anonymous. So for the sake of ease, we're just going to call him John. John, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
No problem.
So, John, foregoing your name, I was wondering if there's anything that you might like to share about yourself, just to give the audience a little bit of familiarity with you.
Yep, I'm John. I'm living in the northern VA region. I'm in the usual teenage years. Is that okay if I leave it at that?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine.
All right, thank you.
So, John, the stories that you posted on Reddit, I really want to thank you again for coming on and sharing these with us, because these are some of the most frightening stories I've read to date.
Mm-hmm.
And there were 2 different ones on there. I'm not sure which one you'd like to go with first. So you can just go ahead and take your pick and share your stories with us, man. Love to hear them.
I'll start with the first story that I linked for clarity. So a few months before this, I believe, a few months before, I was in my room. I woke up around 2 to 3 in the morning, and I got up to use the restroom as I usually do. And I get to the door frame, and then there's this like overwhelming sense that I just need to look up, I just feel like I need to look up for whatever reason, and I do, and there's like this really odd thing staring at me. It's like a blob made out of like a mash of several facial features that just looks over the top of the door frame with its hand on the top edge of the door, and it just get this heavy feeling, it's just something's amiss, something's not right. So I just sort of stood and watched it, and it disappeared. And about a week later, I told my parents, and they seemed rather interested in it. However, they tried to play it off by saying, it's just the light, even though the angles of the lights that I had in my bedroom at the time, they couldn't touch the door, and they couldn't be moved unless they were completely relocated. And there's consistent supernatural events that happened in the bathroom for about, I'd say, 2 weeks afterwards. Like the water would randomly turn on, the shower would turn on with no one in there, lights would turn off randomly while people aren't in or not in the shower. It happened to me while I was in the shower, and the rest of the time nobody was. and I attempted to force whatever alleged spirit that I thought was in there out of the bathroom. And I stood in there with a cross, as me and my family are highly Christian. And my younger sister found out, and my family has given me trouble about it every now and then. About it, I have not come to an idea if it's like a spirit, humanoid, or if it's even real. So I posted on Reddit just to see, what answers people could give me.
Well, if this thing is turning the lights off while you're in the bathroom or turning the water on while no one else is around, I'd imagine it's real.
Yeah.
I've grown up in a Christian family as well. I still am a Christian myself.
Huh.
And I've noticed very much in the Christian community how there is sort of like this uneasiness about, I guess, the darker side of the spiritual world, where they kind of just want to dismiss it, brush it off, ignore it. And I'm not going to say that that's an illegitimate tactic as far as dealing with these things.
Right.
And they usually do just tend to go away on their own anyway. And if you're not feeding them that fear, it might not be making them stronger. But it's always kind of bugged me at the same time, because it's almost like it's a laughing matter or a crazy thing, and it's not. I mean, it's there. If you've ever read the Bible, it's there.
Right.
These things are not illegitimate by any stretch of the imagination.
Mhm.
But I wanted to ask you a quick question for clarification as far as the thing that you did see, the apparition of sorts. You said it looked kind of like a blob, but it also had sort of facial features that aren't in their correct place. Did it have like a humanoid form?
Sort of human form, I'd say.
Okay, so it's like vaguely a human shape,
Yeah.
and about like maybe at human height as well.
I I mean, I guess so. I've seen a lot of particularly tall people. I have a lot of tall people in my family, so I'd say that it would be around average human height, maybe about, if I could guess, 6'3", maybe 4.
Okay, so yeah, above average about,
Yeah.
but not terribly tall.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really weird. And the whole trick of the light explanation, I've heard the same thing for things I've not been able to explain, and I have no way of reconciling those two things: the trick of the light and the thing that I saw. In my particular case, this actually also happened in Northern Virginia. I woke up when I was really young and looked at my closet, and all the clothes hangers were swinging back and forth. And I didn't really know what that was, so it didn't scare me. I was too young to really get what was going on there. But I told my mom about it the next day, because I was just like, this is something weird.
Yeah.
And she was like, oh, it's just a trick of the light. And I was like, oh, okay, it's just a trick of the light. Looking all the way back at it, years and years back, I've never seen, the darkness pit play that kind of trick on my eyes ever again. That definitely wasn't a trick of the light.
That sounds like an interesting experience, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, looking back on it, it definitely was really interesting. I didn't really think of it to be that interesting after it was explained away, right? I just had this calm about it and sort of shelved it until years and years later, when I looked back and I was like, yeah, what really was that?
So for an update on that one particular story, at the time the events had only gotten worse. On the way home from the Home Goods near my local shopping center, my mom saw like this weird thing crossing the road, like directly across from our house, and it looked like a human, but it was like lacking hair and facial features, and like its entire bottom half was missing, and it was like crawling on its own two arms, like balancing. And I had consistently been experiencing a feeling of being watched while I was sleeping. Consistent random cuts or scratch marks, unexplained whispers in the bathroom, had been having the same things happening as I had mentioned before. The lights, they turned on, or they turned off, but never back on. There was showering with no one there, the usual, just a lot more often. And the response on Reddit had helped a lot, actually.
Good.
I attempted to get a sketch of the two creatures I mentioned to see if it would clarify anything, but I never ended up having the time at the moment. But,
Yeah, the creature crawling across the road is absolutely terrifying. But you said you also had scratches on your skin when you're sleeping, when you wake up?
I would wake up with like almost cat-like scratch marks on my back whenever I woke up. Then it would rarely ever like be breaking skin or bleeding, but they were like noticeable, and they were pretty large.
Was it spread out far apart, as if it were too big for a cat to do?
I guess so, yeah.
Okay. Something maybe bigger than a cat, with similar types of claws on it.
Yeah.
No, that's where it gets really scary, is when there's actually physical harm inflicted.
Yeah.
I would recommend taking that fairly seriously and seeing if there's anything you can do about it. Is that still going on for you?
Not at the moment, but about a while back, it happened like for one day in particular, and then it just sort of stopped.
Yeah, I don't like that one bit.
Yeah.
Well, you said you had your family come together, and actually, it seemed like you guys did take it sort of seriously. Got together, held some crucifixes, did some prayers.
Yeah.
Did it stop after that, or was it continuing still after you did that?
Well, for clarification, I had gone into the bathroom with the crosses by myself, and it seemed to sort of die down a bit afterwards, and then gradually rise. And then, that one day it just sort of stopped.
I can relate. There's a lot of people who have that feeling of, especially, when they're alone in their bedroom at night, have that feeling of being watched. That's a very, very common occurrence. And hopefully it doesn't get past that. For some people, it really does. For me, it never did. I had a few things move around. And, I had the deacons of the church pray for me, and nothing seemed to make it better until one day I saw a glass move across my bathroom counter. And it moved like 4 feet, and I was like, this can't keep happening. So I picked up that glass, I put it back where it was, and I said, this goes here. And I felt like there was sort of like a weight lifted off of me after that time, somehow, by using my willpower to kind of, sort of take control over the situation. I feel like I might have scared whatever it is off, maybe. I don't know. But it never happened again. The feelings all went away. The whispers, the moving objects, it all stopped after that. Whereas normally when you get that feeling, you just kind of want to tuck tail and like hide, right?
Yeah. So now I'm guessing you would like me to read my most recent post.
Yeah, if you could. This was completely fascinating to me. This is the first post that I read that you had posted, and it was there's just a lot there.
Yeah. So about a week ago, me and my friend, we'll call him Matt, he wanted to come up here to say hello, but he couldn't. His mother has a stomach cancer, and he had to go to an appointment. So we went to a trip from Walmart, and we came back a while ago. There's this pavement trail down by our neighborhood park that we'd walk up to go to the shopping center because it's close by. We never buy more than we can carry when we go on like a for fun shopping trip. So back on topic, we go back to the park and we discuss random things about anime, troubles with family, troubles with friends, and other stuff. And we hear these like shrieks or screams of some sort, but we initially brush it off since we live in this sort of suburban neighborhood with a lot of kids. And we just put it aside because, it could have just been kids fooling around. Then about 5, I think 7, maybe 10 minutes later, the screams happen again, but this time they're like, you could attribute them to somebody being like practically butchered in a horror movie. And it was even worse when Matt particularly pointed out that they were in 2 different locations. So this sort of like horror movie instinct drove me to check it out, which was pretty foolish. But Matt gets behind me, and I go to check this out at this first part of my neighborhood. It's by the entrance in particular. There's these like bushes and trees, and I'm like a foot away from this bush in front of me, and there's this complete and utter uneasiness that makes me feel sick. And it's like I'm going to vomit every organ out of my body kind of sick, And I'd say that I could compare that to the uneasiness that I felt in the first original story. So the noise is quiet for about 2 seconds, like completely silent. And then something just starts completely like sprinting at me from the bushes that were a few feet in front of me, like behind this one bush that I was at. And it was at like the way back of the scenery. It was large enough to rustle, all of the leaves on the trees and the entirety of the bushes around it. And I didn't figure it could have been human. It was quick as, it was super quick, and I wasn't going to find out just how fast it could truly be. So me and Matt just ran to the point where it was like by the end of the park, we were down by one of our friends' houses. And tells me that the other scream was down by the basketball court in our neighborhood, which is actually where I am now. And me being, the foolish teenager that I am, I went to go check that out. So I go to the court, and it's quiet again, and there's nothing there. And the general area of the bushes that we were just chased out of was about 100 feet in front of us from where we were standing, making it clearly visible. And there's this opening in the trees down there at that end, so I peer into it from my standpoint. And there's like an inhumanly contorting arm with the color of a decayed corpse-like brown shows itself from like the opening down by the bushes. and it hides itself after about 3, maybe 4 seconds. Matt says that he sees the exact same thing when I ask him about it. And again, the usual instinct. I went to go check it out, but this time I pulled out the pocket knife that I think I forgot to mention before. I don't remember, but I actually take it out this time, and I put the blade in front of me, and the same uneasiness that I mentioned in the earlier and then in the last two story. I'm sorry. Uh, it comes back, but this time it's like a lot worse. I mean, like my body feels numb, but I feel like intense pain throughout my body. And I feel like this unusual presence of evil surround me, which my mother had described to me before back when I was much younger. And I arrive about 2 feet from the opening, and there's this voice that whispers my name in my ear. It was like raspy, distorted, and like somewhat human, I guess. It was like an animal trying to trick someone in a Disney movie that they're like a person or whatever, for whatever reason, like one of those comical films.
Yeah.
But it sounded like it went through a million filters, and like when heard, it's like evil and disturbing and just odd,
Ugh.
and it felt like awful.
Whatever it was, it knew your name. I wouldn't say that that's a natural creature.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that. I'm sorry.
No, you did say that.
Oh, I did. My bad. Um, Again, something charges at me from that opening down there, but this time it snarls and growls in a voice so eerily similar, if not the same, to the voice that I had described. And to note, Matt was about 50 feet behind me this time. And wanting to live, I quite literally ran and passed Matt in speed. And I just sort of repeated in my head out of nowhere, I guess sort of on instinct, just sort of, in the name of God, leave me alone. And whatever was behind us just kept running and running, but eventually it stopped, seemingly like right after I stopped saying that, which was pretty odd considering that I think that the first time that I at least said that out loud, it would have stopped, but I don't entirely know. And at the time, I was genuinely terrified, and so was Matt. My mom told me it could have been a coyote with mange or a fox. The problem is, I've heard a fox yell or scream since my grandparents live down in a much more rural area of Nova, and there's tons of foxes down there.
Yeah,
And
foxes can sound real freaky.
yeah, definitely. I heard one back when I was at my 4th of July party with my grandparents before we were starting fireworks.
Yeah, they can sound like a person being murdered as well, for sure.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, and they sounded very similar, but at the same time not, I guess. And like the area of effect in particular looked too big when it was rustling those bushes and stuff to have been a coyote. And
Yeah.
I was concerned for me and my friend's safety, as I don't know what happened. And if it helped any, I added that I lived in Northern Virginia in the post. And as a quick update, me and Matt went to check out the area again, and there was a pentagram made out of sticks just around where we were just at the first area. And I'm now certain now that there was a Satan's cross, or like the Leviathan symbol, if you want to look that up, around the exact same area. It was honestly really weird.
Yeah, I will have to look that up. I'm not familiar with the Satan's cross or Leviathan symbol, but the pentagram can have two different connotations in
Right? Yeah.
magical practices. Either the kind of like a hex symbol of circle of summoning or whatever, as well as
Yeah,
a
certainly.
circle of protection. And
Yep.
who knows which came first, the pentagram there or the weird creature that's chasing you around? I wouldn't know. My guess would be that there is definitely something foul going on there that kind of brought this thing into that area. Because a lot of times when you hear stories of weird creatures like this, there is some sort of dubious origin like that. I'm not going to say I know for certain because I don't play around with magic or anything like that. But I've heard time and time again that oftentimes some of these sort of hermetic types of magical practices, they encourage the summoning of creatures from beyond.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Is that kind of the way that you feel about it?
Certainly, because I've seen like quite a few in particular magical practices that people have performed. One of my friends, I'm pretty sure. I forgot what like her dad. Her dad is from the islands, but in particular, she drew a bunch of pentagrams on my birthday. My birthday's around Halloween, so I guess that probably had something to do with it.
Yeah.
But I brought it up to my dad, and he's just like, "Oh, she draws those all the time." So it might have just been her. I mean, she's never been down there, so I wouldn't know. At least I haven't seen her down there.
Yeah, maybe she's just likes that sort of edginess of the she's kind of an edgelord who just likes that sort of affinity
Yeah,
with or affiliation.
she's a huge edgelord.
Well, that's good to hear. Hopefully she doesn't actually get into practicing some of the darker arts.
Yeah.
'Cause when you do that, things can happen. Things you don't really want to. Unintended consequences, I guess you'd say. And our second episode, a good friend of mine actually practiced hermetic magic and still does, but I think he went down a really dark path at one point in his life and had very, very awful experiences with it. So yeah, that's a long story that I'm not going to get into, but it's just another one of those tales, where a cautionary tale rather, where if you try to use these things to increase your quote unquote power and you go to the wrong entities for that power, things are not going to turn out how you think they would.
Right, and I can relate to that because I think probably about a year back when I was or maybe a couple of years back, yeah, around when I was 13, I went to the same girl's house for a movie marathon with a couple of other friends, and she wanted to play this game called Red Door, Yellow Door. I don't know if you've heard of that.
I haven't heard of that in a long time. I can't remember how it goes.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was like this subconscious meditation where you're supposed to like massage somebody's temples and help them like explore the depths of their subconscious for whatever reason. I never really wrapped my head around the idea, but I just thought it was kind of odd. So I just sort of sit back and watch. I mean, I didn't see it as anything particularly demonic, but I didn't want to get as involved just in case. So they go ahead and do this to this one particularly oblivious seventh grader who we had to explain the rules to, or they had to explain the rules to, I should say. And they go ahead and do it, and there's like this rumor around where if you see like this dude in like a black coat, black hat, anything, it's like a shadow man in particular.
Yeah.
That you're supposed to like exit the trance however you can, because apparently it's the particularly more evil and dark part of your subconscious that is trying to like lead you down that darker path in particular. I never necessarily bought it. I just think that it was pretty odd because the girl in particular, the seventh grader, she had seen the person while she was in that quote unquote trance, I guess. And a couple of people freaked out, and we had to explain to her what happened in particular.
Now, are you familiar with the archetype of the Hat Man?
Not necessarily.
Okay,
I've heard about him.
Yeah, he's a very, very common apparition during sleep paralysis episodes, and they consider him to be like, I guess, the ringleader of the shadow people, and medical science tries to explain sleep paralysis as like a hypnagogic hallucination. It's something within your subconscious that that you see as you're waking. But this is a very, very common thing, and I've always wondered if it really wasn't something from your subconscious, but something that is actually real and that visits you when you sleep.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So the idea that someone could actually just go into like this little trance and see them as they're trying to explore their subconscious might actually lend a little bit of credence that it is coming from within rather than from without, from another world, more that it's in the mind, perhaps.
Yeah.
Yeah, that Hat Man is a very, very common character. There's actually a whole documentary just about the Hat Man.
Oh.
I think it's on Amazon Prime. I'm not sure if it's anywhere else.
Oh, I'll have to go check it out.
There's a documentary called The Nightmare as well, which delves into the Hat Man a little bit also, but it's not solely focused on him. I find the whole sleep paralysis thing utterly fascinating, especially when people see these things when they're not asleep at all. Those are the craziest ones. That can't be brushed off as sleep paralysis and just some, dreaming hallucination or hypnagogic hallucination. There's something else there.
Yeah.
So you said when you guys were walking and you heard this screaming noise, you were talking about anime?
Yeah, we were talking about anime and some other things.
What kind of anime are you into?
We're into me and most of my friends in particular are into this one anime called JoJo's Bizarre Adventure.
Oh yeah, everybody loves JoJo's.
Yeah, it's my favorite show at the moment. I'm on like my first rewatch, and I got them into it. And one of my friends, he's already finished the show, and now he's on his rewatch.
Cool. There was a video game for the Dreamcast, I believe, way back in the day.
Oh yeah, I heard about
JoJo's
that.
Bizarre Adventure. Yeah, I've never played it, but I've watched some folks play it before. Personally, I was more into anime back in the '90s, and I remember on the Sci-Fi Channel every Saturday morning they'd play a bunch of like '80s OVAs, and I got into like Zerum the Animation and Vampire Hunter D. And growing up, I was always really into like Sailor Moon and Fist of the North Star, but I haven't watched very much since then. Yeah, but I also that was just kind of a side tangent. Sorry about that.
Oh, no worries.
Also about the screaming, you said there were two different sources of this screaming, and it sounded like someone was being murdered. Were they saying anything, or was it just kind of screechy shouting?
At first, you could hear like it was like initially screaming. Like if you really like look deep into it, though, it would sound like somebody was like crying for help of some sorts. I felt like I was looking too deep into it because I'm always like known to hear like random things where they probably shouldn't be heard. But I didn't. I probably didn't. Should have mentioned. I probably should have mentioned that, but I didn't. So that's probably my bad.
Well, that's all right. Do you want to go a little bit more into that? What kind of things you hear that shouldn't be heard? Is it just a trick of the mind, or is it like you're actually hearing very distinct things?
I'll just hear like random things out of nowhere sometimes. Like in the wind, I can probably hear like some random person calling my name out of nowhere. I have like a really rare name in particular, so that's sort of like shocking to me every now and then. But as I've grown up, it happens a lot. So I just sort of brush it off.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Now I know that there's a phenomenon associated with that. I don't know what it's called for auditory, whatever you might call it, for looking at something and trying to kind of piece together, like if you're looking at an abstract painting, like a Rorschach test, right? If you're looking at something, you're like, what is this? I see a butterfly, or I see a gun, or whatever. They call it pareidolia, where you're just sort of picking out shapes in an abstract sort of scene. And maybe it's the same with sound for you, where you'll hear sounds and then you just kind of make sense of them.
Yeah. I've had
who knows?
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, who knows? It could be that, or it could be something different.
I've had a lot of experiences with pareidolia in the time. Like every now and then, I can see like particular shapes in like wood, like faces, or like outlines of general things, like maybe a dog or so. It happens very often, so I've never really thought much of it.
When people post pictures online, I don't know if you're into cryptozoology at all, but the whole Bigfoot topic is plagued with people just taking pictures of trees and drawing a circle and saying, "Look, there it is," and it's like there's just a bunch of leaves. Like even if there is a Bigfoot in that picture, there's not enough clarity for anyone else to know. Like that's not evidence. That's just it's basically nothing. Like you have to get a better picture if he's actually there.
Right. Yeah, I've been very into cryptozoology in the past like couple of years. And I do agree. There's a lot of people who will just post a picture saying that like they see Bigfoot or they see something else, but there's not any like there's like barely any clarity for you to actually tell, even if he is there.
Yeah, it's a bunch of junk. You really have to sift through a lot of junk if you want to find anything worth anything, and even then, it's probably not even worth that much. But the search goes on. It must.
Yep.
Well, John, that's pretty much all the questions I had about your stories. They were really wonderful retellings. Is there anything else that you wanted to share before we conclude the interview?
Not at the moment. Aside from thanks for having me on. This is the first podcast I've ever been on.
Yeah, well, it's awesome having you. I really appreciate your stories. They're completely one of a kind. I can't say I've heard anything exactly like what you've seen before, as far as the mishmash of facial features. Actually, I do kind of want to know a little bit more about that. If there is any other way you can kind of explain how that appeared. Was it like a mouth on the top of the head, or what was going on with that?
I guess, yeah, I guess it was like a mouth on top of the head. It was like several facial features where like there was just like, multiple mouths, multiple eyes, sort of just like mashed into this one sort of like homogeneous blob.
Oh, that sounds very Lovecraftian.
Yeah, and then like the hand that like particularly reached on top of like the top edge of the door was very like bony and white. It sounded like something out of like a Trevor Henderson art, if you've ever seen his art.
No, I don't know Trevor Henderson.
He makes a lot of those like if you've ever heard of Siren Head, he's very popular on the internet.
Yeah, I've heard of Siren Head.
Yeah, he draws him and a lot of other different cryptids.
Okay. Kind of creepypasta stuff?
Yeah.
He just makes monsters.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's very much the same vein as that old Lovecraft stuff. The creepypasta guys really do a good job of bringing out the frights. I think Siren Head's a little silly personally, but there's a lot of good stuff in that community.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to say I hope none of this stuff continues happening to you, and it sounds like at the moment you might be at a pretty good point where hopefully it'll start subsiding or just leave you alone altogether. But if anything else does happen, definitely prepare yourself, be brave and courageous against these things. And if anything else does happen, you know who to call.
Yep.
I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it too. Thank you.
So that's it for John's story. I really appreciate him coming on and sharing that with us, despite the fact that he doesn't want to give us too terribly much information on when or where it happened. That was a horrifying tale, and I wanted to look into a little bit about the possibilities of why that might happen. When he mentioned the pentagram and the Leviathan's cross, I really started going on kind of a deep dive with the limited amount of time I have into those symbols. Now, I'm not an expert in the occult. As I've said before, I'm a Christian. I don't really think about these sort of things too terribly much, but then when someone comes on with a story like that, I wonder. So I've done a little bit of research, and I've come across a website called thelemistas.org. I hope I pronounced that right. It's THELEMISTAS.org. And it starts out in chapter 7, where I find the rituals of the pentagram. And it starts out with this quote from Aleister Crowley. The quote goes, "Those who regard this ritual as a mere device to invoke or banish spirits are unworthy to possess it. Properly understood, it is a medicine of metals and the stone of the wise." Now that doesn't make much sense to me, but as we continue reading, it goes like this. "The essential function of the ritual of the pentagram is to assert the dominion of the magician over the chaos of the elemental realm or the phenomenal world. This is done through symbolically signifying and magically identifying the magician's alignment and participation in the spiritual ground of the cosmos. When first learned, these rituals are usually engaged with in a strictly performative manner. Words and gestures are memorized and used without deeper reflection. Familiarity with the ritual can often breed forgetfulness that is not merely a performance piece, however, but rather a profound prayer and moving meditation. Actual, not merely symbolized identification with the absolute is a true goal of the ritual. This requires mindfulness and concentration in the performance of the visualizations, gestures, and vocalizations. Personal issues and problems should be set aside before the manifestation of the sacred space of the ritual. As the Chaldean oracles of Zoroaster state, God is never so turned away from man, and never so much sendeth him from new paths, as when he maketh assent to divine speculations or works in a confused or disordered manner, with unhallowed lips or unwashed feet. For those who are thus negligent, the progress is imperfect, the impulses are vain, and the paths are dark." Now, chapter 7 goes on for a very, very, very long while, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I must say that it doesn't explain much, as far as I can tell so far. So let's continue on to the Leviathan symbol, which is where I feel like I'm starting to piece things together a little bit. This is according to occultist.net. First of all, the Leviathan symbol is pictured, and let me describe it. I will include a link in the show notes to this website. But the Leviathan symbol looks like an infinity symbol. It is a figure 8 that is laid horizontally, the infinity symbol. And then from the center where those two spheres meet, there is a vertical line going upward, and there are two lines that cross that horizontally. And that's what the Leviathan symbol looks like. And it reads, in case you're suffering from emotional issues such as depression and anxiety, Leviathan can be of immense help. This is the main water elemental demon, and water is the element of emotion. Leviathan will change your perception of reality, make you more interested in self-care, meditation, yoga, healthy diet, and tranquility. You will feel more relaxed with Leviathan's energy guiding you in the right direction. Now, what I get from this is that Leviathan is a demon, and he is apparently an emotional demon. And to be honest, it sounds like whoever wrote this piece is the kind of person who would try to sell you quartz crystals telling you that it will cure your autoimmune disorder or something like that. I'm not buying it, but I've done a little bit more research and I can't cite the exact source because there's just been so much I've looked into and I haven't saved every single website. But Leviathan is the element of water, and the pentagram do coincide for a summoning ritual, which also includes the rest of the elemental symbols. And apparently, if you put all the elemental symbols outside of the pentagram and do some sort of incantation, you can apparently summon the Great Horned One. Some of you might call him Satan or Lucifer. And in summoning Satan or Lucifer, you can request a specific demon to help or guide you. And it seems like that might be something like what John would have encountered. Whether a demon that was purposefully summoned or one who sort of slipped through a portal after a summoning had occurred. Now, that's just my 2 cents. I'm not an expert on the occultic matters. I'm merely speculating in this regard, but I like to think that there could be something really happening with that. Leviathan symbol, pentagram, perhaps there were more symbols around, but there was definitely something perhaps demonic going on. I would call it demonic. That's a matter of personal opinion, but it seems like John ran into something that... Anyway, the song you've been listening to in the background is a beat that I made that I entitled Dark Cloud. And it was picked up by a Richmond rapper by the name of Anubis93. And he actually incorporated this on his album of Sutter's Mill. And the track is called Cosmogenesis. So that's what I'm going to play us out with tonight. Anubis93, Cosmogenesis. Have a great night, everyone.
Basic to all Hindu thought is the idea that the world is Maya. That is a Sanskrit word which means many things. It means magic, illusion, art, play. All the world's a stage. And in the Hindu idea, there is the ultimate reality of the universe, is the self, which they call Brahman or Atman. That's what there is. The self, universal, eternal, boundless, indescribable.
I know you're gonna dig this.
Growth of a master, opening the chapters unknown to the last herds, broken out the passwords exposed in my rap verse. Foes who attack earth with clones who act adverse like Trojans on the Mac, worse like viruses infecting your structures. Your irises reflecting the blurred and sputtered. Seeking the explicit fiction depiction which our vision is stricken. Conflict with mystic wisdom that's hidden by Richmond. My mission's lifting the veil off this prison and jail to live and exhale with the gift to prevail against these sinister pale Westminster stale bitches with the minions who've been Wiccans in Yale. Now isn't it frail, these systems that fail Run by scum motherfuckers scripting this hell. Now listen you witches and tell what's pissing off the witnesses. Swimming with the fishes while the well with your wishes in it.
The universe doesn't let you in on the truth that all sense experiences are vibrations of the self. And all of us share this self in common because it is pretending to be all of us.
Check it out, y'all.
Transcendental be my temple of mental. Raising potential when I praise instrumentals. Creating essential grace, sustain elementals. Escaping the hate, the elevating the symbol. Amazing sequential, blazing co-essential. Ways to change your lane, brains too influential. Blessings, filling lessons, confessing test, death and depression. For expressing questions, the questions in the chest of the guessing. With no stressing, I'm heaven's anomalistic, forgotten mystic. Bombing the critics, caught in the gimmicks of the Mothman that mimic. Rotting simplistic, godless hog misfits. Slobs on the gin's dick, be gone in an instant by my squad that's intrinsic. The gods who have been sick, killing frauds with building blocks, revealing thoughts for hidden flocks, concealing spots, revealing rocks popping off the ceiling tops. Feel the vibes, hear the tribes on the other side, where the thunder cries as the hunger dies. Feel the vibes, hear the tribes on the other side, where the thunder cries as the hunger dies. Luminescent when I'm moving my presence, in tune with the present. Blooming the essence of the moon in its crescent, in the tomb of a peasant. I move with the settings of the truth I'm expressing. The testimonies of the weak and the lonely, pleading through the seas of the weaklings and phony. Shouting out with cloud about how power sprouts and far out amounts throughout that spout out. Step to the plate or regret your fate. Express what's great or depression breaks. Confess your mistakes or pressure quakes. Whatever you endeavor forever waits. Create that which you attract to react to impact the path that we tread or be whacked in the aftermath. Acting dead, rapping for bread, collapsed in the bed, the rum drunk in the slums like a
I made
crackhead.
space movies, Quackafellow Records, Incorporated, Yellow Men, Trillionaire Club, and we taking over the industry. Butt Naked Wonder, lose they dick and nuts with alcohol, the pain you feel when you birth your first baby.